Hello and welcome to the History Place, where we look at the historical facts they do not teach you in schools. I am the History Lady, here to lead you through some of the most interesting tales from the past. Let's dive in. The Victorian workhouse. The place people went when they had no other options. A tough, authoritative and sometimes cruel fortress in which thousands of English citizens sought refuge. But refuge from what exactly? The workhouse was originally intended to support the poverty-stricken. In doing so, it provided a shelter for those who were homeless, clean running water, and a meal for those who suffered from hunger. It was built to encourage people to be self-sufficient and not rely on the benefits of the community to provide for them. It was seen by the English government as a way of tackling idleness and laziness. Many people spent years inside the workhouse. Many spent their whole lives there, but the majority of those who were able to get out made sure they never returned. But unfortunately, the workhouse was not the sanctuary that it may have appeared. Instead, there were countless tales of mistreatment, including beatings, induced starvation, child labor, and even murder. Today's tale centers on the heartbreaking reality of life inside the Victorian workhouse. In 1855, rumours of murder and cover-up were circulating in the small North Somerset village of Walton-in-Gordano. Allegations were made that a 22-year-old female inmate of Bedminster Union Workhouse, who suffered from epilepsy, had been murdered. Wiltshire workhouses were brutal institutions that forced poor people into terrible working conditions and harsh treatment. Within a few months of entering the workhouse, Hannah Wiltshire died a violent death after an altercation in the dining room. Her premature death caused public outrage, fanned by a letter-writing campaign to the local press initiated by her pauper aunt, Anne Howe. Illiteracy did not stop Howe from attempting to expose the circumstances of her niece's death and demanding an inquiry. There were accusations that the Board of Guardians, the authorities who oversaw workhouses, concealed the neglect that took place inside the institution. Adding to her distress, Howe was not convinced that Hannah's body was in the coffin because she hadn't been allowed to view her niece's body before burial. Workhouse guardians had the right, under the Punitive Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, to sell dead bodies to medical schools for dissection for £2, 12 shillings per corpse if a body remained uncollected by family or friends. Due to public pressure, an inquest opened in October 1855 at the schoolhouse in Walton-in-Gordano. The coroner ordered that Hannah's coffin be opened for inspection with the jury present, and the body inside was recognisable as Hannah Wiltshire. The surgeon who carried out the autopsy stated that although her skull had not been fractured, there were signs of bleeding under her skull. The workhouse doctor, Mr. Massey, as well as the master and matron of the workhouse were not required to be present at the inquest. The inquest had been told of stories which took place within the walls of the workhouse, with many stating that what happened to Hannah had not been a one-off occurrence. One witness had described how Hannah would speak poorly, and because the wardens of the workhouse couldn't understand Hannah, they would carry out vicious beatings on her. Another had told how Hannah had a broken arm shortly before her death. The day Hannah died, she had dropped her food in the dining room, which led to a devastating reaction from those on duty. Back in court, female pauper witnesses were called to say whether the doctor was sent for, or at least whether the matron visited poor Hannah while she lay dying. After hearing all the evidence, the jurors took only 15 minutes to return the following verdict. The deceased's death was caused by apoplexy, a brain hemorrhage or stroke, but sufficient care was not taken by the authorities of the Bedminster Union Workhouse to separate the deceased from the other inmates of the establishment. The jury are also of the opinion of the peculiar circumstances under which the deceased on this occasion came by her death. This verdict was dissented from by one or two jurors, who were for one of manslaughter. Following the verdict, there was an outcry that a unanimous charge of manslaughter was not reached, and a public inquiry was demanded. Instead, the Board of Guardians agreed to hold an inquiry behind closed doors. Anne Howe persisted in attempting to bring those to blame to trial, with the possibility of them being charged with manslaughter. Although ultimately unsuccessful, her campaign did instigate a coroner's inquest and a private investigation by the governors of the Bedminster Union Workhouse. This was quite a remarkable achievement for an impoverished daughter from the labouring classes, and as a woman with very few rights. The case of Hannah Wiltshire also unearthed disquiet in the community regarding the treatment of epileptic paupers. Perceptions of epilepsy among Victorian medical practitioners were formed by consideration of class and social status, a view that dramatically affected the treatment of the disease. Many Victorians saw the working-class epileptic as a burden on society, and the condition a dangerous character flaw among the labouring poor, while among the wealthy it was characterised as a private misfortune. The inquest exposed many fundamental issues: that certain people and witnesses were not answerable to an inquest court, that the treatment of epileptics was class-based, and that institutions were not sufficiently transparent and accountable to the public. These revelations began a shift of attitude towards the treatment of epileptic paupers, as well as heightened mistrust of management practices inside England's workhouses, particularly around treatment of the old, the feeble-minded, and invalids. Hannah led a short and sorrowful life. She was unfairly and cruelly taken from the world. But Hannah's death led to changes to attitudes to treatment within workhouses, which led to better treatment for the next young girl, who had the misfortune of finding herself stuck in the workhouse.